Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular business meeting of the East Main School District 63 Board of Education. If we can all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Here. Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
So we are at the point of the meeting where we do recognize any public comments. We have asked that those who wanted to provide public comment do so through a form or through online. Ms. Piazza?
We have one email that was submitted.
Okay. That's all? Okay. So we did receive an email from a staff member here at East Main. And Ms. Haley Wedge wanted to address the board regarding her concerns about diverse learners, special education students, and how the district is going to be addressing their, whether or not they will remain hybrid, are they going to be pulled back to remote, and she wanted to be a voice for that student population because she felt that a lot of talk has, been centered around general education. So Ms. Wedge, thank you for that. Okay. Up next, we have Mr. Camps on our 2020 tentative tax levy presentation.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes?
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. Let's talk about our tentative 2020 tax levy. So a little bit of background, 72% approximately of District 63's revenue come from local property taxes. In order to collect those taxes, Cook County requires that they receive a resolution from the district, that their resolution basically represents the levy. The calculation of the levy is subject to laws and regulations, primarily what we call the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law. This law is generally referred to as the tax cap. Just a little clarification on timing. What we're talking about here is the levy for 2020. 55% of it would be received approximately February, March of 2021, and the rest is received July and August of 2021 under normal circumstances. We used the CPI that was reported for calendar year 2019. We received the money in calendar year 2021, but obviously that covers 2 fiscal years, 2021 and 2022, for the money that's received in the fall. A few definitions I want to make sure I always establish to make sure when you hear me say these terms, you understand what I'm saying. When I say the levy, I am talking about the amount of property tax revenue that we are asking for, that we are requesting. When I say the extension, that is the amount of property tax revenue that will be approved, and it's probably going to be less than what we're asking for based on the law. Assessed property values, it basically represents a percentage of a property's market value. In Cook County, residential property is assessed at about 10% and commercial property at 25%. And then you will hear this term a lot from me. EAV stands for Equalized Assessed Value. It's basically the process that the state uses by applying a factor, an equalizing factor that basically takes all the market values to about a third across all counties in the states. It's basically a way of making them uniform. PTEL is the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, and is basically what we have to operate under. We use this law to basically calculate and estimate the amount of property taxes we are going to receive. And the law does this by establishing what we call a limiting rate. It's basically the tax rate that we are assessing. And that tax rate basically caps the amount of property taxes we will receive to what we received in the prior year plus 5% or CPI, whichever is less. So let's talk about the PTEL formula, which will give us the tax rate. On the numerator, we have the last year extension increased by either CPI or 5%, whichever is less. And then we divide it by an estimate of the current year EAV. So the good news is I know two variables. Last year's extension, it comes from Cook County reports. And I know the CPI. It comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics at 2.3%. The bad news is that I have to estimate two variables because they have not been reported yet. They're being calculated this year as we speak. One of them is an estimate of equalized assessed values, and the other one would be an estimate of new construction. But basically, once we have those estimates, we plug them into the formula, and the estimated amount of money we are going to receive, the estimated extension, will be basically the limiting tax rate applied to existing EAV plus that limiting tax rate times new construction. Now, typically, I don't spend a whole lot of time on the formula because it hasn't been necessary in the last 4 or 5 years. But I do want to spend a minute clarifying something that is very important to understand, especially in the world we're living in right now. So when I estimate current year EAV and new construction amounts, and I put them in the formula, my concern is that this limiting rate here, when the report comes out with the real numbers, not my estimates, that limiting rate is actually higher than what I estimated. Why am I concerned about that? Because if it is higher, there is a possibility that I could have levied more money because the actual limiting rate ended up being higher, and I didn't. And there's a possibility that I left money on the table, which I do not want to do. Okay? What would cause the limiting rate to be higher? Very simple. If my estimates of current year EAV are going to be a lot lower than my estimates. I will show you a chart in a second. Over the last 17 years, the estimates of current year EAV have not really dropped much from year to year. In 2008, we had an event that caused that to happen significantly. That was when the real estate bubble bursted. From 2008, for the next 4 years, property values dropped significantly enough that this was an issue, meaning the possibility of leaving money on the table. Today, we are going through an issue that could cause this problem. That is the global pandemic. I believe, and I have data that supports, that next year, when the report comes out, the EAV will be quite a bit lower than what it would normally have been. So let's take a look at that. So here's the last 17 years of EAV in billions of dollars for our district. So our district gets reassessed every 3 years. 2019 was the last time it got reassessed. And when that happens, property values go up. So 2018, we were here, we were reassessed, and we are here. Under normal conditions, I would have no problem estimated next year's EAV. It would be about flat compared to 2019. And if you go back, for example, to 16, we went up and it remained flat. You go back to 2013, about flat. I'm not going to talk about this year's because this is when the bubble bursted in the real estate market, so it's not a fair comparison. 2007 was another reassessment year. We went up, sort of remained flat. 2004, we went up, reassessment year, remained flat. However, COVID-19 hit this year, and that has reduced the market value of properties, especially commercial properties, for sure. Cook County Assessor's Office has issued, I don't know if you've heard of this, it's called the COVID-19 factor, because they are reassessing properties and lowering their EAVs, their assessed values, sorry, by about, we're not sure, but it appears to be about a 10% reduction from 2019 assessment. I received a letter in the mail about my home that is being reassessed, and that factor appears to be about 10%. I discussed with Maine Township's assessors, Susan Moylan Cray, and she concurs with the 10%. Nobody's really saying anything for sure, but my bottom line based on all this data is that I believe that we will see for sure about a 10% reduction in EAV for next year. So that means that the current $1,256,000,000 will be about $1,130,000,000. Any questions about the way I estimated EAV? Let's talk about new constructions. It's a lot simpler. We are a landlocked district. Over the last 15 years, the average new construction is about $4.2 million. We usually estimate about $5 million. I am maintaining that estimate, and it's usually less than that. So I am not concerned at all. So now that I have all my factors, I plug them in the formula. My limiting rate is 3.2805. I apply that to my estimate of EAV of 1.13 billion and my estimate of new construction, and you see the numbers that I get. Arriving at an estimated extension, this is my estimate of $37.2 million. One thing I like to say when I get to this slide is every $5 million of new construction generates about $164,000 in property taxes. Another thing that I like to say when I get here is, if my estimates are dead on, this is the end of the presentation because that's how much money we're gonna, excuse me, that's how much money we're gonna get. But I know my estimates are going to be off, and I want to make sure I protect the district. Therefore, I levy more. How much more? As much as I need to get to a 5% increase over last year's extension of 36.245. How much that is? It's an extra $812,000 to get me to the levy, not the extension, the levy of 38.055. The extra $812,000 is basically protecting the district against about $25 million of new construction, which we won't see. And I stress tested it for EAV drops. And even if the EAV drops by 45%, not 10%, 45%, the district would capture all of the money that it can under the law. Any questions? So now that I know my levy, I just break it down by the funds, and I do every other fund according to the budget that we have, the fund balance targets that we have, and whatever is left, we put in the education fund. And you can see there the 38.055 being exactly, it's actually 4.99% higher than the prior year extension. No need to do a truth in taxation hearing. However, we will have one because we always do. Every number I've mentioned excludes bond and interest. levy, that is really not something we levy. It is given to us by Cook County based on the bonds we have outstanding. So the total, including bond and interest, will be a levy of 42.441. Any questions? So, a couple of summary points. No matter how much I levy, we are going to receive, according to the law, 2.3% over last year's extension, because that's the CPI, and it's less than 5%, plus any taxes associated with new property. Consistent with prior year's methodology, and oh, by the way, I've also consulted with my counterparts in districts around us. They're all using the same methodology based on what's going on. But this levy basically protects the district for approximately $25 million in new construction and almost a 50% drop in EAV. Both of these events should be highly unlikely. So, sorry, I'm having a trouble breathing with a mask and talking. In terms of next steps, we'll have the tentative levy today. Notice in the paper of the tax levy hearing on November 23rd, with the actual hearing and the adoption of the levy on December 3rd, the next board meeting, and then we will file with Cook County by December 29th. And that's the levy for 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Camps.
Thank you.
Okay. Could I please have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes? And that motion passes. Okay, we are on to reports. I just have a couple of things. On October 15th, I attended a virtual meeting for the District 207 Community Advisory Council with Dr. Wallace and other community members. So it's the first one for the school year. It's nice to see what our high school district is doing. Obviously they're in the same boat, similar boat as every other district around in the area. And of course, the biggest push for them right now is they will be going hybrid next week. So, lots of implications, safety, how the teachers are going to be managing students, et cetera. And of course, it was very nice to have a sneak peek on the construction updates of all three buildings. Then on October 28th, again, I attended a virtual meeting of the North Cook Division Fall Meeting. And again, it just, neighboring districts talked about their challenges and how, just as we talk, that things change by an hourly basis. They may have a plan in place, and then the next day they have to completely scrap it. So it's, I don't know, I guess it's nice to know that we're not alone, but still. So that's all I have. Board members.
I can go. I was also able to attend the North Cook Division meeting virtually, and I just echo your comments as well. And then I was also able to attend the Melzer PTO meeting, which was last night, and they've got some really good things planned, even though we have a lot of constraints this year. And then also the Melzer Halloween Parade, which was a drive-by parade, which was super fun to see all of the teachers out there, especially Miss Mackey as a unicorn. So.
I attended the North Cook meeting virtually as well, and yeah, I agree. It's interesting how different districts are handling it, but yet maybe doing some little different things, but really all the same, you know, learning from each other. It's a learning as we go process, and everybody has to freely admit that. You know, you tweak it as you go. Everybody's in the same boat. So,
I attended the Ed Red annual kickoff on October 7th. The speaker for the meeting was Susan Mendoza. She talked about state finances, and really the big thing is that the fair tax didn't pass. So it's going to be very interesting what happens. There's going to be an Ed Red meeting on Friday, and they will be discussing that. She herself admits she does prioritize our mandated categoricals. You know, she's got the schools in mind, but if there's going to be cuts, it's going to affect everyone. So stay tuned. And then I also attended the North Cook Division meeting as well.
Anybody else? Board members? No? Okay. Dr. Clay?
Okay, our hybrid second and third grade students came back to their schools yesterday, and it went really well. So far, our kindergarten, second, and third graders are adjusting to their new hybrid situations. First and second, not second and third. First and second graders came back to their schools, excuse me. And then next week, our third, fourth, and sixth graders are returning. So we're looking forward to getting them back too. And we continue to watch the data very carefully on COVID, and we will be talking about that more later when we get to new business. And that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Clay. Okay, next up, we have Mr. Roberson to discuss student performance.
Do I need to stand up? All right, I'll just sit here.
Whatever's comfortable
okay,
for
perfect.
you. Just
So you should have access to this information. I'm going to share with you the attendance data from this past month, as well as some work completion information for all of you. And then you'll also notice that you have actually access to spreadsheets for both of these categories so that you can drill down to grade levels at every single school if you would like. Just a quick reminder, before September 14th, we had teacher-submitted attendance when we first began remote learning. We switched that actually on September 14th, so you're going to see those comparisons on the chart. I think the biggest thing to keep in mind for attendance, that we have the exact same district average that we had last time I presented to you, which is 97%. So that is a pretty good rate of what we're used to seeing, even for in-person instruction. I think the only biggest change was our preschool attendance went up by about 3%. But other than that, grade levels fluctuated by about 1% or so. So we're seeing consistency with that attendance information. If you move down a little bit, we have some information related to work completion. So I'll kind of share with you how I pulled that information. Something that we added this school year into PowerSchool, which is the system we use to give students grades, was an unable to assess indicator, which really was there for teachers to say if students did not complete enough work for them to be able to assess different standards on their report card. So that's kind of how I'm presenting this work completion information to you. So you'll see the first column, and this is all separated by grade level. You'll see how many students received an unable to assess indicator on their report card. The next column is actually the total numbers of standards-based grades that were given to students for report cards. And then what I basically did is did the math and figured out the work completion rates. You'll see there that we're going to range kind of from kindergarten at 99% work completion, and then 91% around fourth and fifth grade. That's kind of how that varies a little bit. But the district average is at about 96% of work completion rate. So that's relatively closely aligned to what our attendance information is showing us too. And then Mrs. Pacheco is going to talk about social emotional information.
So during the month of October, our teachers, social workers, psychologists, and building principals continue to reach out to our families and support them in various ways. Our students and their families continue to receive building level supports as well as referrals to outside agencies and community supports. The board report that you have contains the specific details and numbers of the different types of supports that our students and their families received. But we also continue to provide some proactive supports with some small group and whole group instruction provided by our psychologists and social workers. And our social workers have also been busy helping some of our families prepare for the transition from remote instruction to hybrid by helping families develop routines and some schedules to just kind of make that transition smoother for our students.
Any questions, board members?
I just have a question. On the unable to assess, so moving forward, what's the plan to try? I mean, I know realistically we're not gonna get 100%, but and these scores are amazing, so don't get me wrong. But just moving forward, because we always want to be moving forward, what's our plan to try and get the unable to assess numbers down and the work completion up? No?
Good now?
Yes.
Okay. So the flow chart, similar to what Mrs. Pacheco talked about, is all about students that we're not seeing either consistent attendance information with or that aren't participating enough to be able to get grades. So those students are put into that flow chart sort of system of support so that the building level can reach out to those families. So beyond just the teacher reaching out to them, we also have like our social workers that will reach out to the families and try to see is there something that you need or anything that we can do to help you get to school more or log on to remote learning or whatever. And principals get involved in that process. So as we go farther along, students get put into that process to basically get more support. And then obviously our teachers, when they're putting unable to assess, those are students and families that they're trying to reach out to in general. So that's currently what's in place and what we've typically had kind of a support system for attendance issues in the past as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. I mean, that's what I kind of figured, but I
Yeah.
really thought it needed to be said.
Yeah, and it definitely goes at the building level. So at this point, our schools are doing a lot of work to try to engage those kids as much as possible. So.
Good.
You know, I know this, nothing is perfect and it's impossible to reach 100% of families. And so I preface my question by that. I get it. But have especially the building administrators, are there any red flags that are popping up that you're really concerned about a certain family that, you know, I'm hoping that's low to zero and not, I know that we're reaching out, but are there any families that we just cannot get to?
Yeah, and I'm wondering if one of the principals might want to take this from me. You're going to know some of the individual families more so than I would. Something, at least that I can say, is even in a regular school year when we have in-person instruction, we have students with truancy issues and
Yes.
Not completing work. So this is not a new situation for us. I think it's heightened because of what's going on with the pandemic, that we don't want families and students to fall through the cracks that really need support. Are there any principals that are interested in? Okay.
I can speak at the preschool level. You know, we have had some families that are not participating in the online learning, but we've been able to reach out to those families, and team members have been able to communicate with them. Most of these families are working families, and they just don't have the time to spend with their preschooler online for those portions of the day because, you know, our preschoolers aren't independent at the computer. So The staff has been really great about supporting the families with sending things home. They're working on choice boards or doing things at nighttime. And then our staff is just checking in maybe weekly or biweekly with those families to see if they need any other supports.
Great. Thank you. And as I said, I know it's not a,
I can speak a little bit at the elementary level too. I think, as Barb said, we have many teachers reaching out to families regularly, and the length of the day also, I think, can be a struggle as well. Some of the times we're using that unable to assess, maybe that afternoon session where the students are in their PFA classes, art and music, so the length of the time that students might be on the computer has been challenging. And as Mr. Roberson shared, we often do have to reach out to truancy officers and other people to kind of ensure that students are getting the education that we want them to have. And we're continuing to do that, connect in ways that we can to support them. So everybody's really working hard to communicate with them. It just models that.
no, thank you. And I don't doubt that. It's just, I think to your point, Mr. Roberson, as you said, given the pandemic, everything is so heightened. And yes, I know you're always going to have, those certain cases of students that are just not coming to school, not doing the work. My concern is that because of this unique situation and given how many families we have that do have language barriers or other issues, how much of that is negatively impacting. And I don't doubt for a second the dedication of our teachers and what they're trying to do. It's just it's just a very difficult situation, and I didn't know if there, if you have seen something that's out of the ordinary, let's put it that way.
One of the other things I can just add is in regards to, oh gosh, now I lost my train of thought. Parents have shared with us a little bit about how being on the computer, I apologize.
That's okay.
It'll come back to me in a minute.
Okay.
Active students who maybe are having a hard time actually sitting at the computer. Parents are communicating with us around how sitting in front of the computer can be challenging. So we're just differentiating a bit more,
Great.
sending packets and all that information as well.
Great.
So, yes.
Thank you.
Apologize. Sorry, lost my
Nope.
train of thought there.
Nope. It's certainly all right. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's just, very challenging time. Any other questions, comments, board members? No? Okay. Thank you so very much for sharing this information. We appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Barry, operations report.
Good evening. Quick update at the Early Learning Center. Avi Paving has been on site working to finish the concrete work and the paving punch list. DLA issued the lock and door hardware punch list last week, and IHC's been scheduling the appropriate contractors to resolve the issues. Majority of them have already been completed. And IHC is working with WT Engineering to have the retention pond details approved so the pond can be completed and seeded. That's why the bottom of that pond hasn't been seeded yet. We're really, really close to closing out this project. At Gemini, they started fine grading the field, and they're going to start installing sod tomorrow and work all through the weekend to get it in before the rain next week. The plantings around the retaining wall will be completed by the end of the day tomorrow. And just so you know, we don't have a date yet for the track surface installation. We're really late in the season, and that might have to wait till spring. Because it's similar to asphalt, the outside temperature has to be in a certain range for them to install it. And then Allied Landscaping will be on site Monday to finish the remaining landscape work from the 2019 edition and complete the punch list from that work. And that's my report.
Great, thank you. Any questions? And I do have one more thing to add. I cannot believe how so many of us were remiss to mention that earlier this evening, Ms. Golick gave some of the board members a tour of the early childhood center. Beautiful, beautiful facility. I cannot. I mean, it just the renderings, the videos, everything just did not do it justice. The biggest comment I have is that every detail was just thoughtfully laid out, and decisions were made in a very thoughtful manner, and it's just really beautiful. And congratulations, and we hope you, the staff, and the kids enjoy learning. So, okay. Could I please have a motion to adopt the following resolution entitled American Education Week, November 16th through 20th, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Did someone want to read this resolution?
Sure, I'll read it. American Education Week. Whereas November 16th through 20th, 2020 is designated American Education Week by the National Education Association in an effort to celebrate public education and honor the individuals who are making a difference to ensure that every child receives a quality education. And whereas education is a pillar of democracy and a cornerstone of American opportunity that gives our children the foundation they need to understand and appreciate our nation's values of freedom, civility, and equality. And whereas public schools bring together adults and children, teachers and volunteers, business and civic leaders, and elected officials, who all have a stake in public education and play an important role in inspiring children to learn inside and outside the classroom. And whereas public schools provide our children with outstanding opportunities in academics, athletics, fine arts, vocational training, and extracurricular activities to equip them with the skills and knowledge needed to grow, thrive, and succeed in our global society. And whereas all education employees, including teachers, principals, assistant principals, administrators, counselors, librarians, bus drivers, custodians, cafeteria workers, and other support personnel, deserve our gratitude, respect, and support for their utmost professionalism and commitment to our schools. Now therefore, be it resolved that the East Main School District 63 Board of Education recognizes the observance of American Education Week, November 16th through 20th, 2020, and encourages all citizens to join people across the United States in showing support for public education, expressing appreciation to school personnel, and celebrating the world-class education that our children receive from public schools.
Thank you, Ms. Urban. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
and that motion passes. Could I please have a motion to adopt the following resolution entitled Perseverance Through Leadership, School Board Members Day, November 15th, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And if you don't mind, I will go ahead and read that resolution. Okay. Whereas school board members are elected to sit in trust for their diverse communities and in that capacity are charged with meeting the community's expectations and aspirations for the public education of their children, and whereas school board members are entrusted with the guardianship and wise expenditure of scarce tax dollars, and they are responsible for maintaining and preserving the buildings, grounds, and other areas of the school district that the community has put in their trust. And whereas school board members are responsible for providing leadership that ensures a clear, shared vision of public education for their schools that sets high standards for the education of all students and requires the effective and efficient operation of their districts. And whereas school board members adopt public policy to give voice to that leadership and employ a superintendent to administer board policy and are responsible for the regular monitoring of the district's performance and compliance with state policy. And whereas school board members selflessly volunteer countless hours to public service with no compensation, and whereas employers are supportive of their employees who serve as school board members, generously lending support and time, employers give their employees the opportunity to better serve the needs of the school districts and communities they represent through sometimes tremendous sacrifice to the employer, and whereas decisions made by school board members directly impact the quality of life and safety in their communities, placing them at the front line of American democracy. Therefore, be it resolved by East Main School District 63 that we proclaim November 15th, 2020 as School Board Members' Day as a way to honor those citizens who devote their time and energy for the successful education of our children. And board, I'm honored to be serving with you, and I thank you for all that you do. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And that motion passes.
And thank you too, Alex.
Okay, so on to new business. We have our metrics review and discussion. So Dr. Clay, I will turn it over to you.
Board members on the stage, it looks like we can attach this for you to look at. You might want to move so you can actually have it as attached. Okay. 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 Okay, so this is becoming a regular thing for us to talk about our metrics and COVID data. So here we are tonight. What I'm going to do tonight is go over, just present to you all the information that we have as far as the COVID statistics go. And you probably are aware that most of them aren't going in a good direction. But there are also some other issues that we're going to have to talk to you about, and we've got some tough decisions tonight to make. I will end the presentation with a recommendation to you. It's a starting point. I'm hoping we'll have a good, solid discussion about where to go from here, because we do have some things that we need to discuss. So just a reminder of our metrics. You've seen these many times now. Right now, we are smack dab in the middle of that center line for positivity rate, where it says between 5.01 and 7.9% we'll consider slowing or reversing the phase-in model. And in fact, tonight, as of today, we're almost up to the 7.9%. As far as new cases per 100,000 go, we've been over our 175 plus for quite some time, and we're over 300 cases per 100,000 right now. We had also established that a return to full remote learning would be when we had an 8% positivity rate or higher and 170 cases per 100,000. So we're getting there. Hopefully it'll turn around. Here is some updated rates for our 5 communities. You can see that displays for Halloween, October 31st, they were just under 11%. So we have 3 communities that are 7% or higher: Glenview, Des Plaines, and Park Ridge. Niles looks like it's holding pretty steady. Morton Grove was on a big jump up, and they've come down a little bit the last day or two. So this one is another one that you've seen. This is our averages as they're trending. And you can see that for that 7 days, we've gone from 5.89 with a pretty steady upward climb up to 7.76% as of the 3rd. So something I haven't done for the board before is give you the last week trend for each of those 5 communities. So I wanted to show you that tonight so you can see where things are going. Displays has been increasing for a while now. You can see in the last week they went from 7.04 up to 11.14% right now, or as of 2 days ago. For Glenview, Glenview has also been on the rise. Over the last week of this, they've gone from 6.39 up to 7.67. Morton Grove, like I said, had been on the rise, then they came down a little bit. They may be going back up. This one is a good example of how these numbers kind of spike and decrease from day to day. So you can't look at just any single day in anything. So we don't know what Morton Grove is going to do. Morton Grove was our lowest positivity rate for a long time, and for some reason, the virus has really taken hold in that community. For Niles, Niles is holding really well. They're mostly in the 5%. They've had a couple days below that. So Niles is our bright spot for now in the district. Park Ridge had things that looked like they had spiked early in the epidemic. They've come down, and now it looks like they're going back up. Just in those 7 days, they went from a 3.88 up to a 7.52 or a 6.2, I can't tell from here. So another thing, I just wanted to put this out here for whatever it's worth. It's important to remember that we don't work or exist in a vacuum either. It's not just those 5 communities. We have many staff members who come from lots of other communities, and some of those communities have low positivity rates, and some of them have very high positivity rates. The one that surprised me was Mount Prospect, where we have 30 of our employees who actually reside there, and they have an 11.41% positivity rate. The people in Evanston are doing really well. There's 16 of our employees there, and they've got like 3.74 and 2.51% in those 2 zip codes. So you can see that it's a range, but we do have people coming from areas where there's a high infection rate. So this is off of our website. This is our COVID dashboard. We just had to update it recently. So it keeps changing. We've had 8 confirmed positive cases in the district so far. Let's see, total contacts, that's people who are considered close contacts, 33. And since November 2nd to today, we've had 12 close contacts and two new cases. Anything I'm missing in there, Dr. Schleiser? Okay. Right, we had another close contact. Okay. So we're doing pretty well here, but you can see how quickly that could get out of hand. We've had to close a couple classrooms in the time that we've had kids in the schools. Yes.
It has escalated in the last few days. We've had a number of cases, nurses and contact tracing, and we've had 13 close contacts, and that was just yesterday and today.
Right.
So it does seem to be ramping up along with what's happening out in the world.
Okay. So for the people who aren't in the room, what Dr. Schleiser was saying, that it does appear to have escalated a bit in the last few days. We've had more cases. So just a little bit of a summary. For our hybrid classes, we have 45% of our pre-K students coming to school, or will be starting Monday. 42% of our K-5 students are coming to school or will be when they're phased in. And just 39% of our 6th through 8th grade students are planning to come to school. One of the problems that we're going to discuss tonight is that these small numbers of kids actually coming to school will force us to combine some classes and move more teachers to remote learning, which means kids are changing classrooms again. So in our remote classes, we have 55% of our pre-K students are planning to stay remote right now. I have a correction on that one that I just received on the next one. It's up to 59% of our K-5 students will remain remote. And at Gemini, it's 61% of our 6th through 8 students will be remaining remote. And this is happening on a steady basis. In fact, we had a couple come through as we've been sitting here in the board meeting. We've had, I think those 2 will make 17 this week that we've moved or have something like that. So here's where the big problem comes for us. We chose the remote model and developed it because we believed and still believe that it was the best decision educationally to have teachers dedicated to our kids who are going to be learning remotely rather than sitting at home watching the teacher as she teaches the kids inside. Not that they wouldn't be participating, but we believe that's a very different learning experience. We have said for a while now that we thought 60% in remote was going to be about as much as we can manage. And right now we are right on the edge of where we can no longer sustain our remote learning situation. We made this decision based on some things, mostly educational, but we also, in every district that I talked to or any other administrator said they talked to, they were getting about 25 to 30% people going remote, and that we could have managed. And we were prepared for it to be a little bit larger. We had no idea that we were going to get the kind of movement toward remote that we're getting. And I think there's possibly two reasons, and these are guesses of mine, but I think parents are showing us that they're pretty happy with the remote process that we have. Kids are really doing pretty well. And actually that 61% or around 60% matches up with the parents in our survey who said, yeah, we're pretty happy with the remote learning in District 63. So that is one of them, and I think we have some cultural things. And there are some cultures that feel differently in one direction or the other about how to deal with an infectious disease like this, and so I think we're seeing the effects of having a very diverse population and the unpredictability of that sometimes. Okay, let's go on to the next. All right, so this is our K through 5 hybrid classes. So if you're looking at those numbers, right there in the middle, where it says Gen Ed range, no dual language included in there, you can see that our class sizes range from 11 up to 28. And that 28, I think, is a one-off, correct? Just one class is that big. It just happens to be where the kids fell in that particular grade in that particular school. Many of the classes fall in the 11, 12, 15 range. Our average class size for hybrid classes in K through 5 is 15.8. That would be dream class sizes under normal circumstances, but it ended up causing us the opposite problem we were expecting to have. And then our remote classes in this chart, you can see that the class sizes for our remote classes range from 24 up to 30. And if you move over a couple columns or three, look at what our capacity is. We don't want our primary grades, K, 1, and 2, to go above 28, and we don't want our 3, 4, and 5 to go above 30. So that's our capacity that we're setting. And then we have a column there that shows the seats remaining. And it looks like there's quite a few seats there. But then the next column is people who are awaiting transfers. We have 13 or 14 of them up there, 15, that we haven't assigned yet. We have 5 days once the parents make a request to put them in a classroom. So you can see in the last column where there are seats remaining, we are out of seats in first grade, and we're already over our limit in second grade. Some of those upper grades, like third and fourth grade, looks good right now, but something we've learned is that the closer we get to those grade levels coming in, the more the switches start to happen. Which way did I accidentally go? Okay, Gemini has the smallest percentage of kids coming to school. They have more kids overall, but they have 61% of their kids going into remote. And as an example, at the very bottom there it says 66% of all change requests have occurred this week. So their start back is coming, and they're starting to drop out or return to remote pretty quickly. So we expect more as third and fourth grade gets closer to their start date. So here are some things to watch out for. The fact that 3 out of our 5 communities have positivity rates above 7% right now. Our cases per 100,000 is above 300 in all but one of our communities. Region 10's positivity rate, which we don't really talk about that much because it's such a huge region, but it's 11.1% as of November 2nd. And I mainly bring that one up because that's where the state's going to be watching, whether they do any other restrictions and possibly close schools again. Again, I've mentioned many of our staff members come from communities with high positivity rates. And Something we haven't talked about, but I've talked about with lots of other superintendents, is that the upcoming holiday breaks are opportunities for widespread outbreaks of COVID because people are naturally going to be in large groups for their celebrations. A lot of our families will travel over those times. And so there's a lot of fear among schools that people will come back with more infection. And we can't enforce any kind of quarantine just because somebody left the country or we could, but with leaving the country, but if they went out of state or they had a large family gathering at their house, we can't quarantine them for that. And then, of course, we all know that colder weather means fewer outdoor activities, which also is opportunity for more spread. So here's a recommendation that I want to make to you as a starting point for our conversation. So I'd like us to continue with our transition as planned unless our district average positivity rate reaches 8% or higher for 3 consecutive days. That's how the state determines it, IDPH does, and that's because of those spikes and dips that happen with the numbers. So if we had 8% in 3 days, according to our metrics, we would go to all remote. And then I would recommend that for 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, we stay remote for 2 weeks. So we continue bringing kids in for hybrid up until we go to Thanksgiving break. Then we have our break and we stay closed for 2 weeks, kind of as a overall quarantine period. Then the week after that, we could return to hybrid for the week of December 14th. And here's the bad timing part. Then we go on Christmas break or winter break. And then I would recommend another 2-week break after winter break. And then when we return, and here's the big change that I think we do absolutely need to do. And I don't like this. It breaks my heart because we have a fantastic remote learning program. But when we return to hybrid instruction on January 19th, that's the day after Martin Luther King Day, we will revert back to all of our original classes and remote students live stream into the classroom, like many, many other districts are doing. Then we can maintain the number of kids in remote, no matter how many go to remote. Another alternative to that, instead of having that 1 week where everybody comes back, just go all remote from Thanksgiving until January 19th. Or we can do any kind of combination there within there. And that, as I say, is that. So thoughts?
Question I would have, as we're bringing back the students now, I mean, we're already into November, is there any consideration to stopping that? If we're going to be off between Thanksgiving break until January 19th, why don't we just stay remote until January 19th?
That's certainly a possibility. I know we've got a lot of kids and parents looking forward to getting their kids in. I thought getting them in for however long we can is a good thing.
I'm just thinking they're going to be there a week, you know.
I know. Well, actually, 8th graders under this plan would be in for a day before we went out. So, I think that's already the plan, right? They come for 1 day, then we go on Thanksgiving break. 3 days?
3 days.
Okay.
So my thought is, I actually think your plan is pretty solid, and I would continue bringing kids in, unless obviously positivity rates or outbreaks occur, then we change course. But it seems like that is the plan that Maine East and Maine Township is continuing with, and other school districts that I'm hearing of. I do like the idea, though, and a lot of colleges are doing this, and I think a few other districts now that I'm hearing about it, is just stopping the week of December 14th, or stopping after Thanksgiving and going remote all the way through January, 19th?
19th.
I think that makes sense. Bring them back for a week actually is probably a good way to spread COVID versus just going remote for the 5 weeks. At that point, anybody who attended large gatherings, etc., by January 19th will have had breakouts, and that I think will keep everybody safer. And I think the other thing is obviously to watch if positivity rates keep going worse and worse, then obviously I think we need to have another discussion at the December meeting to determine that maybe we need to extend it. But I'm pretty comfortable with just saying, let's shut it down for 5 weeks, go remote. And I like your idea of streaming, because that gives you so much flexibility. Somebody's sick for a couple of days, they don't, it just makes it very easy. you can easily switch back and forth if necessary for those students that are doing the hybrid. So that's my thoughts.
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
I do like your alternative, just that 5 weeks. I don't like the back and forth.
Right.
When you say revert back to original classes, so I know a lot of kids got their new teachers this week. Would they keep those teachers, or would they go back to their original teachers they had when it all started?
We were saying go back to who they had for the first 2 months of school or whatever, however long that was.
So they would go switch back to those teachers?
Then we wouldn't have to switch anymore from there.
Yeah, and then you would.
Right.
Okay.
Because something else to think about that is a downside of the plan that we have in place right now is that currently when we get to trimester 3, we again need to ask parents whether they want remote or hybrid, which potentially will reshuffle the classes yet again.
But if you just revert back to original classes, would it? If the students live stream in, would that matter then?
I'm sorry, would what matter?
In trimester 3, if students are live streaming into their teachers, it wouldn't matter whether they're hybrid
No,
or
we
remote.
would eliminate that by doing what I suggested tonight.
There's a lot of technology involved then in order to live stream the classroom.
Correct. Would you like Keith to talk to you about that?
I would.
Yes. Yes, thank you. I was going to ask the same question.
Yeah, there is. We are currently have some of it in stock right now, and we've got more on order. We're going to have to be a little flexible in how we set up those classrooms based on the student population and the teachers' needs. But we're looking at tripods with webcams. We've got some audio enhancement systems coming. There are things that we're trying to do to prepare for it. Bluetooth headsets for teachers so they can be walking around the classroom and still communicating with the student that's remote or students.
And so then how would they see the students that are remote? Would they be like on the big screen on the wall?
That's an option. That's one thing that could be going on, or that we could possibly just be on one of the monitors in the room. If they're using the large screen for instruction, it would be hard to have the students displayed there. And actually the camera would either be pointed there or the teacher may be sharing their screen with the students through a Google Meet where they could then see and have some interaction with the classroom.
Right. I don't know, I'm just trying to think. The
Ms. Urban, make sure you're
It
speaking
is.
in the
I'm
microphone.
sorry, I'm just
That's
sitting
right.
back. Sorry, my mic is on. I'm just, the times that I've heard of this happening, and I know, we're stuck in a rock and a hard place here, but what ends up happening more times than not is that the students that are sitting in the classroom it's like they're remote, but they're sitting on their computer and they're in the classroom because the teacher's over there on her laptop so she can monitor the kids that are at home and do the lesson and flip her screen. And so it's really just the kids are in the classroom doing the exact same thing that the kids are doing at home. You know what I'm saying? It's not that there's the interaction that people are going to think that is happening for the kids that are there. It's making it harder is what it is for the teacher.
Right. Yeah, you pointed out a couple things that were reasons we didn't go that route in the first place. But our teachers have become really good at doing small groups remotely now, and they know how to manipulate all the different applications that we have. And so we feel like they'll probably be much better at balancing the two. But we do need to talk about teachers because this is harder. It is harder to have kids on the computer and kids in front of you in the classroom. And one of the things that we've been able to do up to this point is accommodate a lot of the teachers who had issues with childcare, issues with some medical issues that didn't necessarily rise to the level of qualifying to be off work, but we were able to accommodate them. And we wouldn't be able to do that under this plan because almost everybody, unless they have a medical exemption, would need to come back to teach. So we have those issues too.
So where are we with staffing then? How is that going to be impacting us because of that? Dr. Schleiser?
We'll have to look at every person's situation and the medical documentation that's provided and, you know, determine who has a disability and whether the disability, you know, there are reasonable accommodations available. So it's a case-by-case basis. The plan that's being proposed has staffing issues, and our current situation has significant staffing issues. So, as Sheila said, sort of between a rock and a hard place. We're still trying to hire teachers in the event some people can't come back and need to take leave. You know, we're doing our best to plan for that. We've already hired a few extra teachers. They're not extra now because they're going to have classes starting next week. But if we flip back to our former classes, we do have some people who can take over sections. Now, we also have some large classes that we're likely going to need to break up to reduce class size. We have some large fifth grades at one of our elementary schools where we need another teacher, as well as a few other spots. And we're still trying to hire just to make the classes smaller because this environment is certainly unique and poses a number of challenges for everyone involved. So we'd like to keep the classes as low as possible and give everyone a fighting chance.
I think the one thing I see is that there is probably a good possibility that we'll be starting the 21-22 school year with some type of hybrid model, at least initially. We don't know, of course, but this plan does allow us to do that. And I think I've heard other districts leverage, you know, if you have a teacher that at least temporarily has to go remote, let's even say quarantine for 14 days, you could have a teacher assistant in the room with a teacher on the screen. Not a perfect scenario, right? But at least it gives us some options. But I do like the fact that for the kids, also if a child has to quarantine for 2 weeks, I mean, they can still live stream without skipping a beat.
Correct. The kids who are quarantined is another one of those things that triggered our thinking on this, because we have had some of those, and we didn't want them to switch classes for the quarantine period.
Right, and as I said, both scenarios pose different challenges. One challenge, if we go to the recommended plan, is that it will significantly increase our need for substitutes. Because we are having teachers and staff who have to quarantine and isolate. So, you know, we have, you know, less than half of our staff working at home now, but that they're able to work every day at home, basically no matter what happens. Whereas if just about everyone is at school, that will significantly increase our need for substitutes.
But can I ask a question?
Sure.
If we have a teacher that needs to quarantine for whatever reason, but they feel fine and they can work from home, right, to do remote learning, could we not have a teacher assistant in the room instead of a substitute? Because they're not teaching? Because other districts are doing it, I believe.
That can get complicated in terms of providing reasonable accommodations, and I would advise against doing that unless we absolutely have to.
One group in the room is hearing this suggestion for the first time too, and that's our principals. This is something that has kind of come to light and we've been mulling over this week. And in fact, I just finished the presentation late this afternoon. So principals, you've had a few minutes to mull this over. I'd be happy to hear from some of you and your thoughts. Barb?
Just hearing it for the first time, I think I worry a little bit about our preschool teachers streaming and meeting with students online, because two very different worlds. You know, when preschoolers are in school on a daily basis, they move around and they do centers, and I guess we would really have to think through what that would look like if we have remote and hybrid students in the same type of classroom. So I just worry about that a little bit with our population.
I share the same concerns for the younger students. However, you know, something I'm thinking about and have been thinking about since the start, going into this year, I was thinking it's going to be a year of stops and starts. And I think of our teachers right now and our students, it's a lot of energy to start a school year, and it feels like we've done it twice. And I think if there's a way to provide longer periods of stability, we can funnel our energy more into the best practices that we can provide instead of all that energy that it takes to kind of go through a transition. Still processing because it's new information, but I like the idea of not so much disruption. That's been very, very challenging, I think, for teachers and students. I think they've been incredibly resilient and done a phenomenal job with it. But if we can have a period where we are in a routine and staying in a routine, I think that's, you know, even our teachers that have transitioned to new remote classes, they've just talked about, especially our older kids, are in a very good routine with what they're doing and thinking, what do we gain by disrupting that and what do we lose by disrupting that? And I think it's really important to weigh that out.
I think that's a good point too, and the fact that we would be sending the kids back to the teacher they started with is less of a disruption than the ones who had to go to a whole brand new teacher this last transition we made. And Sean brought up a good point that we just can't say enough, is that we are making choices between bad options, really.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no great option that we're faced with. So unfortunately, that's the kind of world we've been living in for about 7 or 8 months now.
I like the idea of continuing as planned regarding the transition. I like the alternative of just being remote to not, I don't see the point of going back for a week. To me, it just makes more sense. So many, like, universities are doing that. I like the concept of this hybrid instruction, but I have to say I'm very concerned about our teachers, how they are going to be managing the students in front of them as well as those that are going to be live streaming. And that I'm very concerned about that.
As we all are.
And I don't know. I hate to put the other principals on the spot, but I would like to hear from as many of you as possible if you've had time to process at least a little bit. Because it's at least important for me, and I know for others, to get different viewpoints, perspectives.
So I'm digesting this news, but I think we've all been thinking that what we're doing right now is not sustainable. And at my school, we have 60% of students we started hybrid, and the numbers have just been dropping, and it isn't sustainable. As the COVID numbers go up and someone's being quarantined, that's a child's month of education, and where do they go? And so I think we have to look more at the global picture of what's best for all of those kids in the class. And each kid counts. So, I mean, in the beginning, I was not in favor of streaming, but just having 2 more grades this week, I don't think there's another option for our kids, especially when numbers are high. I think maybe we would have been in a different situation in the fall, but every child who's dropped is due to COVID numbers. So we can't have 30 first graders, and we don't know how long this outbreak will last.
and that is a child's elementary career. And we need them to succeed as a whole. I think it's our job as administrators to figure that out and to also utilize all of the staff in our schools on how do we make sure the remote students are attended and the students in front of us, because that is going to be the biggest challenge.
I just want to say that throughout this whole process, our teachers and our kids have been resilient. Our kids, I don't think, are going to know the difference between a change in the situation we're in. I think our teachers have done everything we've asked them to do, and I think that they'll do this too. I'm confident that Keith can get technology for everybody, and I'm very confident that the teachers, they'll do what's best for kids. They've done it all year long. They've done it since I've been here. So again, it's something new, and just gotta get used to it. But again, I think the kids are just excited to be back if they're back, or be online if they're online. They're just excited to learn. So I think it's a win-win situation.
All right. Well, ooh, you know how to drop a bomb there. So I don't know, and obviously it's always different with middle school. So, you know, when we talk about the kids would go back to their original teachers, I don't know if that would happen in middle school. I don't see the benefit of that, and I just think it would be a lot harder, actually. They be trimester 2, they start with a teacher. Let's just keep them with that teacher through trimester 3. I'll be honest, I don't know if we decide to go out with Thanksgiving, and then I don't think coming back for a week before the holidays and then to go out again, I just think that's more disruptive. I don't know the benefit really if, you know, like 8th grade, we're going to bring them back on Tuesday, and those 3 days really in the building are just getting used to routines, procedures, how do we operate in the building. Those are just 3 wasted days where they could just be learning online. I go the same with 6th and 7th grade. 6th grade will come back. You know, the first couple of days are all going to be about routine, so we're losing instruction. Whereas if we just keep them online, they'll just continue to get that instruction. I could see if we were coming back and it's going to be the long haul, but those to me are instructionally some wasted time. I'll have to wrap my head around the streaming thing. I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of it. I wasn't a fan of it when I had to do it in college. I felt like the kids that were streaming in kind of got the short end of the stick because we would get involved in the conversation, and then it would be, you know, they kind of get forgotten about. So it's going to take time for teachers to get used to that. It is going to be a lot of work for our teachers, but what we've also talked about is what we're seeing is it's not sustainable. We're collapsing classes every day. You know, at Gemini, we're now, you know, we've had to collapse every day this week, a grade level collapse a section, move kids around, you know, rearrange I've rearranged that furniture in that building more times than I think we did moving into the building. So, you know, I think we had a good idea. We didn't realize how many of our families would want to do remote. And now I think as the numbers go up, more people are choosing that. And there's a breaking point. I don't know what it is, but it's getting to the point where now we have at 7th grade, 23 kids in a classroom in the building, and we can't fit one more. So I don't know what to do, but I don't know if bringing those 6th, 7th, and 8th graders back for those few days is worth the disruption to both students and teachers.
While we're on the topic of middle school, I think that, Lewis makes some really valid points. I think he's right about not switching the kids back to their teachers at that level. It probably just makes sense for them to stay where they are if that works out for them. I think 6th grade would be in school for almost 2 weeks before.
2 weeks.
9 school days?
9 school days.
Yeah.
I just think of first couple of this, they would be getting accustomed to something that then they're gone outside.
I just say that, yeah, we'd bring them back for 9 days. The first couple of days are getting accustomed to these routines that then they're gone for, I mean, if we agree to be gone till the 19th, that then they're gone for, we're just going to have to do it all over again.
I would be fine with 6th, 7th, and 8th not returning until after this whole thing, but I'd like to hear what the board thinks.
I agree with that, because I think, you know, again, it's such a short time frame. We're already at the 5th of November. And really for all the kids, and I think the other thing to keep in mind is 60% of our parents are telling us they want to be remote. So in some ways, we're kind of accommodating 1/3 of our population at the expense of what we're saying might be difficult for the remote learners who are going to be at home streaming while the other children are in school. So I think that's something to consider as well. We're not like the other districts around us. We're not at that 25% rate. We're at 59% and potentially going higher. So I just think we have to be cognizant of that.
I agree. I do think our community is giving us a message that they don't want to be in school right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as much as both my kids are the middle school, and as much as I want them back, I think it's kind of, I don't want to say pointless, but like I agree, you're going to spend days teaching them routines and then send them back home, and more disruptions than is needed, especially for those coming in hybrid. So I'm okay with Jim and I not going back before January.
Okay. I think 5th grade could fall in that same category. They would only be in for 4 days, too.
So I'm going to be the dissenting voice for this reason. I know I will use Maine Township as an example. Maine East had orientation live 4 hours for every kid. That was huge for my son to actually meet his teachers in face-to-face. I've heard really positive feedback on that. I'm assuming Maine Township will also be at probably 40 or 50%, at least Maine East. I have also heard from a lot of kids that they are fine when they stream. There's a lot of kids who go in every other week, and that I believe is going to be Maine Township. They're going to be streaming. Kids are going in for 4 days, then they're out for a week, then they're going back in for 4 days. And throughout all that, they're streaming while the other kids are in class. I've talked to a lot of kids, both in this state and some other states who are doing that type of hybrid. They seem to be fine with it. There's always challenges, but I also feel like if we keep pushing stuff back, there will always be another reason to push stuff back. That was this case in August. We saw positivity rates are high. They're even higher now. There's going to be other issues that come up. So if we don't bring the kids back at some point, even for a couple of days, we'll never bring them back. I mean, there'll always be other issues. Whether then the flu season is going to start, I mean, there's going to be other things. So that's my dissenting voice in that. And I really do feel we should bring them back, even if it's for a few days. Give them a chance. They've already requested. They're saying they want to come back. Let them come back.
Hi, good evening. So yes, we just heard this for the first time. There are a lot of thoughts in my head because I'm a details person, but just a couple main points with the plan. I do think that the alternative option is better. I don't see the point of bringing kids back for a week in between, especially for the younger kids. Just getting in and out of the building and the transitions and getting reacclimated is really complicated. Overall this year, I think we've asked a lot of our families, parents, staff, and that's not just our district, that's just the state of how things are. So if this is the way that we go, like I agree with what Lauren had shared, that if we could find any consistency for the teachers, that would be most important. So I do think the alternative gives that at least. And I do believe, like Howard said, that our teachers will rise to the occasion, but we as administrators will provide them as much support as possible, and we will figure out a way to structure the streaming if that's what we have to do. But what we are doing currently is not sustainable. Every day, most of us are spending trying to figure out what to do with kids who are in quarantine, how to keep our remote teachers at levels that are acceptable for online learning, and calling Sean, basically. So we definitely need a change, and I know that this isn't perfect. And to your point, it is difficult for staff, but Keith has some good ideas on how to maybe do streaming in a way that isn't just, the computer right in front of them, like someone had shared. So hopefully we can meet those goals.
Thank you, Angela. Barb, you have something?
Can I ask a quick question as you walk over there?
Go ahead.
When a student does have to quarantine, if they were in person right now, what happens?
It's sort of me, but it's also Aaron. So I'm going to let Aaron.
Yeah, so currently our plan is if a student has to quarantine, that they have been temporarily joining another remote classroom for those 2 weeks. That has not been an ideal choice, but kind of been what we've been doing at the moment. And I just wanted to quickly say, I know there are probably some teachers at home listening to this for the first time as well. I just have to say that as a district, we've put a lot of time and energy in trying to keep some sort of instructional integrity throughout this process. I think that's the big reason that we moved forward with strictly remote teachers and strictly hybrid. And I think you're hearing from everyone that it's not something we can sustain. So I think it's important to share with our community and our teachers that we really tried to go the way that was gonna maximize teaching and learning. And it's not working out, and that's super sad. But if I know anything about this district and this family, we'll rise to the occasion. I mean, a year ago, you could not have told me that our teachers would go to remote learning last spring and find a way to make it work. So I believe we can. It's not ideal, but I think we're going to support each other and figure out what to do if we decide to move that direction. And I took your time, I'm sorry.
As I was listening to Lewis, I just wonder similarly to, for the Early Learning Center and preschool students, would it be a benefit to continue to have hybrid and remote teachers just due to the different structure that preschool has? We haven't had as many students requesting remote at this point. We have had a few. But, we do have our families that want hybrid, and we have those that want to stay home, and we've been able to accommodate that at this point. And it hasn't been an issue, so I just wonder if that's something that we can continue to do moving forward. I think it would be a lot easier to collapse a section of either morning or afternoon and move students than have teachers teaching both remote and hybrid at the same time. So something to think about for our population.
Okay, it seems like we have a few things that we've got consensus on. It sounds like there's strong consensus for going remote between Thanksgiving break and Martin Luther King Day.
Yes.
I didn't hear anybody.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Correct. Also, we were resigned to the fact that we need to move to the streaming approach. I think it's perfectly fine if the two schools on the opposite ends of our district, preschool and Gemini, if that can be worked out, I'm fine with them doing something a little bit different. I think Gemini's situation is unique, as is the Early Learning Center. So I think we as administration need to talk that through and figure out what can work at those two levels the best. What else is outstanding? I think the big question now is, do we keep bringing kids back? Do we do a pause?
I haven't talked yet.
Okay, Kate.
Can I you all know am very in favor of kids being able to go. I can't find a lot of flaws in this. I agree with the alternative option. And I agree with the internal battle I'm having between my thoughts of the teachers' needs and the children's needs and the technology issues and all of it that goes together. I still think there's a lot of value for those youngest kids in elementary school, the 3rd and 4th graders especially, that have been counting down the days to get to go back. I think there's some value there still. I defer to the middle school experts but I do think there's value in that 40% that might be struggling to be able to have that chance to go back for a little bit.
Right. And I think, too, we have to think that the third and fourth graders, and, well, it's the sixth graders, too, but they're so close to coming back, I think it would be tough on them to say no. I think Lewis and I need to talk about sixth grade, what to do with them. But I would right now propose that we bring third and fourth grade back as planned.
Yeah, I would too, and I
And
think
pre-K.
that, yeah. I think especially for the younger ones, they want it, they need it. I think that if we can, that would be my preference. For the 7th and 8th graders, that's a totally different story, and yeah, 6th grade, I guess that's something, I don't know.
Right. Unless the board feels strongly about it, maybe we can figure that out
Yeah,
between us.
yeah, but I think you're right, Dr. Clay, that I think we're all in consensus about having that, following the alternative, which is that 5-week period or whatever it is, 5 weeks of remote learning and 3 weeks of break. That makes the most sense. And then just take it from there. But I would like, for our next meeting, I would like to get a better understanding of what the live streaming would look like. And I just, as I said, I'm just very concerned about our teachers and what kind of, what that's going to look like, just managing that. So.
Okay. We'll be working on that plan.
Yeah, that's my hesitation on this too. Just, and I understand you can't have, 30 plus boxes that you're looking at trying to teach at home. It's not going to work, and it's really, really difficult. But I expressed my apprehension from what I had heard about the live streaming plus live children in the classroom at the same time. So I have utmost faith in Keith to get this up and running here. But my other question
No
would be-
pressure.
My question there would be, with our internet going on with all this, would we even have enough, or do we have enough devices where teachers could even log in on two different devices? So I just know, like, they're going to be screen sharing. They're still going to want a device where they can monitor the kids and stuff, and they're doing that at home now because it's just them. But now we've got like all these other teachers and all these other kids.
Yeah,
in the
in every
building.
classroom, there's a dedicated computer connected to a presentation system. In addition to that, every staff member has a laptop or a Chromebook. So there are some options there.
Okay, well, that's helpful. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's gonna be very difficult. And I would like to know how we're gonna make this work so it's not that these kids that do come to school end up sitting on their computer just like the kid who's at home. I mean, what's the benefit of them coming to school then? Then except for daycare is really what it is. So, I mean, if that's what we need to do, then that's a whole different story. But if parents are wanting to send their kids back to get the in-person learning experience, it's not going to be that. If they're sitting on their computer here, that kid's at home on their computer, and the teacher's over there on her computer trying to monitor all this going on at the same time.
Right. I don't think that's the biggest risk. I think the biggest risk is the kids at home being left out to some degree.
Yeah.
I don't think our teachers will put the kids in front of them on a computer all day. I don't know, Aaron, do you want to talk about that? Have you given this any thought? I've given you about 10 minutes to think about it.
So let's save the really exciting stuff for obviously next board meeting. But I will say a couple of things. Like I said, the instructional integrity for remote and hybrid students has always been the focal point here. I know with some of the leaders in our department, we've talked about this as an option and what this could look like. Like to your point, Mrs. Urban, the goal would not be to sit all kids in front of a computer all day and just change where they're doing it, either in school or at home. That would not be the goal. But we're going to have to, and we're going to have to think through the details. But the goal would still be that students in person at home would have some small group support or one-to-one conferring and different things like that. So there are districts that are doing things like this. We just have to really explore what our plan will look like for our students. So I'll have more information for you next month, but I can't give you as many details right now. But we have explored the idea, started to put some framework of what this could look like in place. But I can assure you that this department and our leaders at the building level and our teachers, we will try to honor both groups of kids as equally as we can. So we will be working on that plan for the next few weeks, if that's the direction that we go.
And then if that is the direction that we end up going, if that's the direction we end up going, how will our teachers be able to be trained on doing this and made aware of what the expectation is for them so that it doesn't end up being what I explained that I've heard happens in other districts?
Yeah, the only thing I can tell you, at least right now, because I'm not sure what the next few weeks will hold for us, I'm sure there's a lot of details that need to be worked out. Prior to our remote learning plan that we put into place in August, we had to find creative ways to let teachers know what the expectations are before they came back and only had a few days to prepare. So, something that's always been important, at least from the teaching and learning department and principals at the building level, is a robust communication plan. So sharing that plan weeks in advance, we did webinars, we did Job-alike group meetings, we had training sessions with digital learning coaches the 5 days before school began. So we do put things in place to ensure that, and we did it before the teachers even arrived this August. And I feel confident that we would do the same thing, and we would actually have more time, I think, from now until then, to figure out how to make teachers feel as comfortable as possible. They're not going to feel perfect about this. I'm putting myself in their shoes, and I understand it's going to be a challenge. But we're going to do what we did in August, and we're going to find a way to make it happen. Communication has been a top priority throughout this process. So, and I think if you remember the staff survey results that we did share with all of you, I believe, in September, the staff overwhelmingly felt that they were supported in implementing that remote learning plan then, and I feel confident that we can, do that once again. So I hope that kind of answers your question. So.
Yeah, thank you.
And I have a question. How would this look then? The same would hold true for Ms. Pacheco for our diverse learners and our self-contained classrooms. How would this?
That is an excellent question that I'm still kind of wrapping my head around, but I do feel like, some of this is actually already being done and has been done since we've started hybrid back in September. There have been times where I've walked into classrooms where a teacher is showing, the morning social story on the board, has her laptop facing the board, and students kind of sitting next to it around the table, socially distanced. So we have some pretty creative teachers that have figured out how to make it work. And we do have the benefit of having some additional adult hands in those classrooms to support learning remotely while a teacher is teaching in person or vice versa.
Okay, thank you.
And I would hope we can get creative and, if we need to figure out how to get some extra hands even on a temporary basis in some classrooms to help teachers or something once a week or whatever to make sure the kids in the classroom are just sitting there. I mean, I'd be all in for that. I won't speak for the rest of the board, but we have a lot of experts here, so I'm confident we can come up with something that would make it as good as possible in a situation that's not going to be great.
I agree with that concept, especially I'm thinking about the youngest kids. I fear that Sheila's saying that the teacher's going to have to continually still be helping them on the computer because they're still not proficient enough. So then the kids in the classroom won't get the same attention. So if there is a way to help the teachers that need the most help, obviously each class is different. Maybe those kindergarteners at Washington are, you know, amazing and they don't feel like they need an assistant, but maybe somewhere else does. If we can kind of assess with the staff and say, how are you feeling it's going? Is this something that you feel like you need? We have a limited number, and just kind of get that honest opinion back from them. Again, like Walter said, I don't know how feasible that is, but.
Right, we have a limited number of staff, obviously, that we
Right.
have to do things with, but yeah, we'll support them as much as we possibly can.
And then this return in January would be the same schedule we have now, the 8 to noon, and then,
Right.
okay.
Right.
And then logging back on at home for the
Correct.
extra hour.
And would children, sorry, one more question. Would children still have to be opted in at the trimester? Or at this point, you say, well, it doesn't matter? Or do they have to say, yes, I'm going to be in person? Are you going to have them do that?
That's, I think we have to think that through and talk
Okay.
about it. I'm not sure.
Okay.
You know, off the top of my head, it sounds like it's okay if they want to come back, but we have to think about that. Yeah.
Well, I would imagine you'd want to think about numbers and capacity and
Right.
where to appropriately socially distance and.
That's what I'm thinking. If
Yeah.
all of a sudden the numbers get really good
Right.
and people are like, yeah, I want my
Yeah,
kid
we'll
to
come
go
back,
back.
yeah.
Right. So I think we'll need to
Mhm.
really think about that. So.
Right, I agree. All right, anybody else before we end the discussion? All right, thank you, everybody, for participating. That's very helpful. And to the staff at home who are listening, we are going to work through this the same way we've done everything else, and together we can get through this, but we're trying to make sure it works for all of us.
Thank you. Okay. Could I please have a motion to approve the following donations from these generous donors?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes, and thank you to our donors. Could I please have a motion to approve the revised 2020-2021 school calendar as presented?
So moved.
Dr. Clay, do you want to?
Sure. We agreed with the EMEA to not have our half-days for the rest of this year because students have already missed out on a lot of instruction. And so we're removing those, and then some adjustments were made to the end of trimesters and report cards.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Ms. Urban? Yes. Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
Ms. Brooks?
Yes.
Ms. Kaczkowski?
Yes.
Ms. Deck?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Booth?
Yes.
That motion passes. Could I please have a motion to approve the two MOAs for the EMEA and the EMTAA 2020-2021 leave time accounting?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Clay, did you want to comment at all on this, or?
Sure. Since the elementary school day does not split evenly at lunch anymore, under the current plan, the way we did it, some people were taking an afternoon and getting charged for a half of a sick day or a half of a vacation day or whatever. And so to match it up to the actual time, it's 60% of the day is in the morning and 40% is in the afternoon.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
Ms. Brooks?
Yes.
Ms. Kaczkowski? Yes. Ms. Deck?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Booth?
Yes.
Ms. Urban? Yes.
And that motion passes. Could I please have a motion to approve the tentative 2020 tax levy?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Kaczkowski?
Yes.
Ms. Deck?
Yep.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Booth?
Yes.
Ms. Urban? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and that motion passes. Could I please have a motion to adjourn the regular business meeting of the Board of Education?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
That motion passes. We are adjourned. The next regular business meeting of the Board of Education will take place on Thursday, December 3rd, 2020 at 7 p.m. here again at Apollo in the Apollo Galaxy Theater. Thank you and have a good night.